So let me get this straight. Siegfried went from being one of the worst servants at release to now arguably being the best SR Saber, and he has a smoking hot wife? Talk about self-improvement. Hello everyone, SoberOni of GNA Reviews here, with a spotlight for the big titty goth GF who will do a lot more than just step on you, Kriemhild. We'll be examining her stats and skills, as well as going over pointers on how to utilize her effectively, and an overall grade comparing her to how she stacks up to the other 4-star servants. So if you've been struck with a bad case of Siegfried envy, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and ring my bell so you can catch all of these spotlight videos as they go up, and you can help out the channel. And now, on to Kriemhild's stats. Kriemhild has a max HP of 9,922 and a max attack of 10,400, which becomes 11,440 due to her berserker class modifier. While her attack stat is decently high even for a berserker, her HP is the lowest in her class. The extreme stat differential holds true even when compared to the other SR servants as well. Kriemhild has a top 5 attack stat and a bottom 5 HP stat among all the 4-star servants. When it comes to her command cards, Kriemhild has 3 hits on her quick cards, 3 hits on her art, 3 hits on her buster, and 5 hits on her extra card. She has an NP gain rate of 0.53% and a star rate of 4.9%. Her NP gain is only about average, but still better than most Zerkers, mostly due to having 2 arts cards, while her star generating is not very good. Kriemhild has the typical glass cannon Zerker stat spread, with all of her stats spent on her attack, and she's spread thin everywhere else. Taking a look at her skills, Kriemhild's first skill is Revenge Plan Rampaging rank B++. This skill reduces all enemies' NP gauge by 1, reduces their defense between 10 and 20%, and reduces their critical attack chance for 3 turns between 10 and 20%, both effects depending on level. Her second skill is Reciprocated Slaughter rank A. This skill increases her buster and arch card effectiveness for 3 turns between 20 and 30%, and it increases her damage against chaotic alignment enemies for 3 turns between 30 and 50%, these effects depending on level. And finally, her last skill is Affection of the Court Lady rank EX. This skill is a targetable taunt for 1 ally, and it charges Kriemhild's own NP gauge between 30 and 50%, and recovers between 1000 and 3000 HP, both of these effects depending on level. As for her passives, Kriemhild only has 1, and that's Madness Enhancement rank EX, which increases her own buster card effectiveness by 12%. Moving on to her deck and Noble Phantasm, Kriemhild is an Arts Buster deck with Quick Arts Buster Buster and an Arts Noble Phantasm. Her Noble Phantasm is Balmung Kriemhild, which is a single target arts attack that deals damage to 1 enemy with a damage modifier between 900 and 1500% depending on NP level. It also removes all defensive buffs from the enemy, which activates before damage, and deals an additional 150% extra damage to dragon enemies. In addition, it also reduces the enemy's arts card resistance between 20 and 40% for 3 turns, depending on overcharge. Unfortunately, Kriemhild needs a lot of very annoying to farm bronze mats for her ascensions. For level ascension, she's going to need 15 fangs, 5 bloodstone tears, 6 reverse dragon scales, and 30 unforgettable ashes. As for her skills, things get a lot more bleak. She's going to need 8 bloodstone tears, 30 fangs, 60 stakes, and 60 ashes per skill. So happy farming. So, you want to use a single target art Zerker, but Vlad is just not waifu enough to fit on your Castoria Tamamo super squad? Well, boy do I have the solution for you. Introducing the new and improved Kriemhild, the art Zerker with all the power, NP spamming, and OP utility of a Vlad, but with triple the cup size. All joking aside, I won't beat around the bush here. Kriemhild is an absolute menace of a servant. Despite her somewhat middling stats, she's essentially a top tier SSR servant cosplaying as a 4-star. And it all comes down to her massively overspec'd skill set. Her first skill, Revenge Plan, is a strong debuff that reduces the enemy's NP gauge, reduces their defense, and reduces their crit chance. Stall skills like these are not very common on berserkers, so when we do get them, they tend to be overtuned. And oh boy is that the case here. This skill is a straight up AoE NP drain that also lowers defense and crit chance. The NP drain alone is phenomenal utility since AoE drain is very rare, and it's usually tied to NPs, but Kriemhild has this available to use anytime whenever she needs it on a skill. It's amazing stall utility for challenge quests, and it synergizes perfectly with other art supports like Tamamo and Waver. The crit and defense down are just icing on the cake, and they allow Kriemhild to just live a little bit longer while dealing even higher DPS. And speaking of DPS, Krim has a big steroid in her second skill, Reciprocated Slaughter. This skill buffs her arts and buster cards by 30% for 3 turns, and it gives her a powerful anti-chaotic damage mod as well. The uptime on this buff is pretty good considering just how much it gives you. Nearly Kriem's entire deck is arts or buster, so she gets a lot of mileage out of the split buff, and 30% is a good number. And assuming the debuff from her first skill lands, you're looking at a 3-turn 50% buff across nearly all of her attacks, which is bonkers, especially considering that she's already a berserker and has one of the highest attack stats in her rarity. But what really sticks out about this skill is the anti-chaotic buff. There are a ton of chaotic servants in FGO, well over 100. And many of them are regularly recurring bosses in both story and challenge quests. That means that for many of the servant battles in the game, this single buff is actually closer to an 80% total damage buff than it is 30%. And finally, what is an art servant without an NP battery? Affection of the Court Lady, Kriem's third skill, is not only a targetable taunt that heals her, but also charges her NP gauge by a whopping 50%. I don't think you need me to tell you that a 50% NP charge on a berserker is pretty bonkers. Just look at Kentoki. It allows her to hit with her NP consistently and easily, even on turn 1 with little to no setup. It also helps her with spamming her NP consistently in longer fights. The taunt shouldn't be overlooked either though. A targetable taunt is exceedingly rare in FGO, and it can essentially buy Kriem an entire turn of survivability or redirect an enemy's NP to an ally that has invincibility or evade. The taunt combined with that sizable heal gives Kriemhild some decent survivability. Skill priority for Kriemhild is straightforward. NP charge first, followed by the card buff, and then her NP drain last. If you want, you can also pick up mana loading as her append skill. Kriemhild's NP gives her even further utility for challenge quests by being a single target arts nuke that also removes all enemy defensive buffs. It also reduces arch card resistance and deals additional damage against dragons. The buff removal occurs before damage, which makes this NP invaluable for all manner of challenge quests. It is one of the few noble phantasms that can hit even through Castoria's anti-purge defense, and it can essentially hit any enemy no matter what buffs they have active, of course with the exception of unremovable buffs. The extra damage against dragons isn't bad either, as there are quite a few servants with that trait, and the arts down just helps soften up enemies for Kriemhild's follow-up attacks. All in all, it's a phenomenal noble phantasm that accomplishes just about everything you want from a boss killer. And that's what Kriem does best, kill enemy servants. Her toolkit's wide range of abilities that provides her with everything from AoE NP drain to buff removal to even a targetable taunt gives her unmatched utility in any challenge quest. She will always have a way of hitting the target or at the very least stalling them out and weakening them. She also has a strong repertoire of offensive buffs for herself that allows her to hit above her weight class. Everything from attack buffs, defense and art resist debuffs, card buffs, and even 2 separate damage mods for chaotic and dragon enemies. So 9 times out of 10, she will be dishing out tons of bonus damage against whatever she's fighting. And one of Kriem's most underrated but important aspects is just how well she synergizes with modern art supports in ways that even other top tier arts DPS servants don't. She fits right at home in stall teams with the likes of Tamamo and Waver due to her ability to misdirect enemy attacks with her taunt and drain their NP, but she also benefits even more from offensive supports like Castoria due to her unique damage mods that scale multiplicatively with the buffs that Castoria can provide, so she can reach deceptively high damage numbers. In fact, against chaotic aligned enemies, her noble phantasm even outscales Vlad's by a wide margin. Kriemhild is a tour de force who can make a case for being one of the best single target art servants in the game, period, not just among berserkers. The only area that Kriemhild falls short on is in survivability. She is a true glass cannon and doesn't have any hard defensive skills, so she's entirely dependent on supports to keep her alive. This unfortunately does hurt her in battles that go for longer than a few turns. But thankfully, if you are a DPS who's desperately dependent on supports for survival, Arts is the best place to be. There's no shortage of art supports who can keep Kriemhild alive for the long run. Servants like Jean and Mosh are especially strong in that regard, and Rhaenys takes their survivability even a step further by removing Kriem's berserker weakness at essentially no cost, since Kriem doesn't really use crit stars that much anyway. Tamamo is another excellent choice as well for both her healing and cooldown reduction, but also because she can drain and stall out enemies alongside Kriemhild. Kriemhild's Bond CE is something I could not care less about, which is a fitting name because all it does is increase the party's damage against chaotic and dragon enemies by 15%, so it's never really worth using. Instead, Kriemhild will get much better results from full-on offensive CEs that boost her NP damage, like Black Grail, Formal Craft, Ocean Flyer, or Phantasmal Princess. In the future, Rising Mud Rain can be a good pickup for really short fights, as it gives a 40% buff to NP damage and increases her overcharge by 2 stages, which can help her burst down enemies really quickly. As for command codes, I really like Evangelist of Unconditional Love because it synergizes with Kriemhild's anti-chaotic buff by giving a card an additional 25% bonus damage against chaotic aligned enemies. Overall, Kriemhild is not just one of the best 4-star servants we've ever gotten, but one of the best servants in the game, period. Her damage is capable of matching and even surpassing her SSR counterparts under the right circumstances. Her challenge quest utility is on par with some of the best in the game, like Melt, due to her ability to remove defensive buffs and drain enemy NP, and she has amazing synergy with just about every art support under the sun, making her very easy to use and new player friendly. Krim's only real drawback is a lack of survivability, but considering her role as a glass cannon, that's hardly a concern in most cases, as long as you use her correctly. So Kriemhild gets a well-deserved S from me. I think you can make a case that she is the best SR servant in FGO right now, at least in terms of DPS. And hell, she's even better than most of the SSR berserkers. So whether you're new to the game and need a bully who can carry you through the story content, or you're an endgame player looking for an ideal build-around servant for challenge quests, Kriemhild is the ideal pickup. And those are my thoughts on Kriemhild. Obviously, I love her a lot. Not only is she amazing aesthetically, but she is stellar gameplay-wise as well, and she's even easier to obtain due to her SR status. So she's a triple threat. Plus her banner's pretty good, so there's really no reason to not throw at least a couple of rolls her way. Who knows, you might even get a little lucky. Well, what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and consider subscribing if you really enjoyed the video. Join the party over at our Discord, chill with us on Twitch, and follow us on Twitter, and I'll see you all in the next Servant Spotlight. Soberoni out. Later.